She just wanted a job as a receptionist, but she walked into the wrong room and ended up changing her life. Maya Rodriguez woke up before her alarm clock even went off, as she always did when anxiety stole her sleep. The dim morning light barely made it through the frayed curtains in her bedroom, but she was already up, brushing her hair in front of the cracked mirror taped to the wall. The small kitchen shared the living room, and the smell of chamomile tea wafted from the cheap coffee maker, where her grandmother snored softly on a mattress propped up against the couch. Maya was 26 and constantly felt like she was late for her own life. As she pulled on the only suit she owned, a navy blue one, a little loose in the shoulders, bought at a thrift store in downtown New York, she murmured to herself like a mantra, "Today's the day. I just need one chance." The interview was in an imposing building on the Upper East Side, a place she had never felt at home, not even when she was cleaning the service floors. Today, at least for an hour, she wanted to pass herself off as someone who belonged there. On the crowded subway, holding herself together with difficulty as she read the instructions on her cell phone for the 100th time, Maya imagined what it would be like to work as a receptionist at a serious company, to have a name tag, a presentable uniform, maybe even a good health plan, the kind of stability she had never known. When she got off in front of the mirrored building and saw her reflection in the glass, her hair tied back in a hesitant bun, her faded canvas bag, her low heels threatening to blister her heel, she felt a chill run down her spine. "Don't look around. Walk in with your head held high," she told herself. The security guard in the lobby glanced at her with brief curiosity, but said nothing. She simply showed her printed email address and headed toward the marble elevators, her heart pounding. At the indicated floor, the hallway forked into 2 rooms. Nervously, barely breathing, she pushed open the door to room B, thinking that all those letters and numbers referred to the same interview. As soon as she entered, the room seemed to swallow her up. It was too bright, too quiet, too fragrant. There were 3 women sitting there, all dressed up as if they had stepped out of a fashion magazine. Impeccable dresses, professional makeup, sky-high heels. Maya felt her face immediately flush. "Have I come to the right place?" she thought, but she didn't have time to ask. A woman in a grey suit, elegant, holding a tablet, approached her. "Are you Maya Rodriguez?" Maya swallowed hard and answered with a shy smile. "Yes, that's me." The woman just nodded briefly and led her to a glass-enclosed room where 3 people, 2 men and a woman, all in formal attire, were sitting waiting. "You can sit down. Let's get started." Maya straightened her suit, folded her hands in her lap, and tried to keep her voice steady, even though she didn't understand why this interview seemed so peculiar. "Maya, do you consider yourself discreet?" asked the man at the end. "I guess so. I'm not one to draw attention to myself," she replied, trying to sound confident. "Would you feel comfortable around influential people in formal settings?" the woman said, without smiling. Maya hesitated, but nodded. "If it's part of the job, yes." Every sentence felt like a test, every look a thorough evaluation. She didn't know that, at that moment, her life was starting to go completely off script. What Maya didn't know, and would only understand later, was that this wasn't the interview for a receptionist at a logistics company, as she thought, but rather a confidential selection process for a position as a corporate relations escort, aimed at elite events with powerful business people. What led to her being selected was precisely her disconcerting naturalness. While other candidates listed experience with galas, social media, management and international etiquette, Maya said that her greatest talent was making people feel a little less alone. When asked if she knew how to deal with the press, she replied, "I've cleaned many journalists' offices. I know they like strong coffee more than gossip." And amidst the suppressed laughter, one of the evaluators commented, "She's perfect. She just doesn't know it yet." As she left the room, her legs felt shaky and her mind full of doubts. But when the receptionist said, "You should hear back soon," Maya smiled, even though she didn't know what it was about, and pressed the elevator button hard, dreaming of a steady paycheck, health insurance, and maybe a new refrigerator for her grandmother. Ethan Cole watched New York City from the 23rd floor of the building, where he ran the empire he had helped build with his own hands, or at least that was what everyone liked to repeat in the headlines. But he knew that his hands no longer held everything that mattered. Firmly, the panoramic view from his office did not bring peace, but rather a constant feeling of being trapped behind glass. The scandal with his ex-fiancée had spread like wildfire. Fast, toxic, impossible to contain. Leaked messages revealed cold conversations, agreements disguised as affection, promises exchanged for advantages. And now his advisors were demanding that he clean up his image, as if it were as simple as changing his suit. You need a woman by your side, one who conveys truth, someone who doesn't seem like part of this theater that everyone believes in except you. The crisis advisor's words echoed in his mind, mixing with the bitter taste of the coffee that was cooling between his fingers. Ethan didn't want any more shop windows. He wanted silence, but he also knew he couldn't disappear. "If I'm going to choose someone, let it be real," he murmured, as if he no longer expected anything. It was then that among the dozens of reports and profiles submitted by the partner agency, Apex Talent Solutions, an image emerged that didn't fit into any category. A simple woman wearing a floral dress with a shy look and a profile so incomplete that it looked more like a system error. Maya Rodriguez, the name said. The agency director scratched his head before explaining, "She entered the wrong room, sir. She was here for another interview, but, well, the evaluators were impressed. They said she's everything you asked for. No filters, no posing, no artifices." Ethan raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "And does she know what she was being evaluated for?" The director's silence was answer enough. Ethan gave a dry laugh, something rare in recent months. Maybe her mistake was the right thing we needed." And with a slow gesture, as if closing a cycle or starting an experiment, he pointed to the photo. "Call her, but do it carefully. Don't treat her like the others. She doesn't seem like the type to handle this world." And then, for the first time in weeks, Ethan felt something different stirring inside his chest. Curiosity, maybe, or hope. 2 days later, Maya was surprised by a phone call that nearly made her drop her cell phone into the sink where she was washing dishes. "Miss Maya Rodriguez, this is Apex Talent Solutions. We are pleased to inform you that you have been selected for the position. We need you to come in tomorrow to sign the contract." She almost blurted out, "But I don't even know what I said in that interview." But she bit her tongue and simply replied, her voice cracking with disbelief, Sure, I'll be there." She hung up the phone with tears in her eyes and shaking hands. She looked at her grandmother, asleep in the armchair, and thought, maybe now is the time. Maybe finally something will work out. That night, she carefully sorted out her clothes, ironed the only white blouse she owned, and wrote down her bank account information and her social security number in an old notebook, as if simple organization could protect her heart from disappointment. The next morning, the city looked different. The sky, which had previously been gray, had turned golden, as if the universe was also rooting for her. Maya arrived at the agency 15 minutes early, her feet aching in the tight heels, but with the smile of someone willing to endure any discomfort for a better future. She was greeted with excessive kindness. Coffee was offered. Her elegant attitude was complimented, and a navy blue folder was placed in front of her with the contract printed on letterhead. It was only then that she began to notice something strange. The title read, "Executive Escort Service Agreement, Gold Level." She frowned, read it again, and again. "Excuse me, isn't this for the receptionist position?" The girl in front of her smiled as if trying to calm a frightened animal. "No, miss, this position is special, confidential. But believe me, It's a unique opportunity. Maya's eyes widened, her stomach churning. Escort? I've never accepted that. The door behind them opened with a soft click. Ethan Cole walked in, looking impeccable in a grey suit, and looked at her as if he already knew her. You've come to the wrong room, he said calmly, but maybe you've come to the right one for me. Maya couldn't tell if it was the expensive suit or Ethan Cole's direct gaze that stopped her, as he seemed to be crossing the room without rushing, as if he were measuring every inch of her reaction. She stood up abruptly, her fingers still trembling on the folder with the contract. This is all a mistake. I came here for a receptionist position. I take care of my grandmother. I clean offices. I do housework. I'm not the type of woman for this. Her voice trailed off at the end, between indignation and the fear of seeming too small in that room full of glass, silence, and people with a lot of money. Ethan didn't smile. He just approached her with disconcerting calm and said, I didn't think of you as a type. I thought of you as a choice, maybe the only one who doesn't seem to be acting. Maya took a half step back, surprised by the lack of arrogance in that sentence. This is a proposal, not an imposition, but if you want to hear it, I can explain it respectfully. She looked at him, still suspicious, and for the first time felt that perhaps she wasn't being treated like an object, but like someone who had the right to say no. They sat, side by side, but at a safe distance. The agency employee left discreetly, leaving the two of them alone. Ethan explained bluntly what was expected of her, to accompany her to social events, press meetings, gala receptions, but always by his side, representing a new image for the company. There are no intimate demands, no intrusion. You can leave at any time, and I just want someone who will look me in the eye like you did in that interview, even without knowing what was at stake. Maya clasped, her fingers on her knees. The silence between them was long until she spoke in a whisper. I'm not a doll to parade around with you. I have a difficult life, a sick grandmother. I'm not going to sell myself. Ethan nodded slightly. That's exactly why you're the only person I'm interested in right now. She stared at him for a second longer than necessary, and then she sighed. I want a clear contract, with rules. I decide where I stand. Ethan replied firmly, but unhurriedly. You're hired. The contract, revised that same day, included clauses that Maya demanded with the seriousness of someone who knew the value of her own dignity. No forced exposure to the media. No obligations beyond physical presence at previously agreed-upon events. Mutual respect and a fixed monthly payment with the possibility of immediate termination by her. Ethan read each item carefully and surprisingly even suggested adding a personal security clause to ensure that she would not be approached alone by any reporter. I don't want you to feel cornered. I want you to be by my side because you choose to be. Maya heard these words with a mixture of skepticism and incredulity. She was used to seeing men in power use kindness as bait. But there was something different in his look, a shadow perhaps, a contained exhaustion that made her want to believe. If you cross any line, I'll leave, even if it costs me dearly, she said. And you have that right whenever you want, he replied, extending his hand. She shook it. And in that gesture, more than a professional agreement, a silent pact of respect was signed. That night, Maya returned home carrying a folder with copies of her contract, a corporate card with a generous limit, and the strange feeling of entering a territory she didn't know how to navigate. Her grandmother, seeing her arrive with tears in her eyes, asked, "Did you get the job, my girl?" Maya smiled, sitting down next to her on the bed. "I did, Grandma, but it's a different job." Grandma touched her hand affectionately. "As long as they don't ask you to forget who you are, then it's the right thing to do." Maya rested her head on the old woman's shoulder and fell silent. Deep down, something in her still wanted to run away. But there were bills to pay, medicine to buy, and maybe, just maybe, a strange destiny beckoning her from behind the wrong door. The first time Maya wore a formal dress was also the first time she felt that the fabric could weigh more. than a cleaning uniform. The stylist hired by the agency had greeted her with a clinical look and many comments about figure and fit that she barely followed. She was measured, fitted, made up, and styled with such precision that she barely recognized herself when she looked in the mirror. The dress was a deep blue with a discreet slit and a bare back, tailored to impress. "You look stunning," the assistant said with an encouraging smile. But Maya didn't feel stunning. She felt out of place, almost like a fraud. The high heels barely allowed her to walk confidently, and the red lipstick seemed to scream on her plain face, unaccustomed to so much embellishment. Even so, she took a deep breath, thought of her grandmother, and climbed into the black car that would take her to the most elegant event she had ever attended. From the back seat, she watched the lights of New York as if she were watching a movie she wasn't part of. Arriving at the event was like entering another planet. The five-star hotel ballroom was lit by chandeliers that hung like golden constellations. The tables decorated with floral arrangements that would cost more than Maya's apartment rent for months. The scent was of expensive perfume, and the sound of glasses gently clinking together formed a subtle melody of restrained wealth. Maya felt her heart race. Ethan appeared at her side a moment later, impeccably dressed in a dark suit with navy blue accents that matched her dress. Coincidence or strategy, she couldn't tell. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice low. "No, but I'm already here," she replied, not hiding her nervousness. He smiled just with the corner of his lips. "Then let's go." And offering his arm, he led her to the center of the ballroom, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Maya, however, felt the gazes turning one by one, like invisible blades cutting into her satin-covered skin. It didn't take long for her to realize that the smiles were too polite, and the questions were venomous in their sweetness. "Where do you know Ethan from?" "Oh, I've never heard of you in New York circles." "Do you work in fashion?" "No? That's interesting." Maya answered as little as possible, with a restrained smile and her eyes trying to escape the hidden judgments. When she stepped away for a moment to get a glass of water, she heard a muffled whisper behind her. "You look like one of those escorts he used to hire, only with less experience." She pretended not to hear, but her face felt hot. Her hand shook as she held the glass. She thought about leaving, about disappearing, about ripping off that dress and running back to the neighborhood where no one would mistake her for anyone else. But Ethan was across the room, talking to two partners, and his gaze met hers like a silent anchor. He was watching her intently, not with desire, but with something rarer: respect. When she returned to his table, Ethan noticed the discomfort on her face. "They're being cruel to you, aren't they?" he asked quietly, pretending to be interested in a speech on stage. Maya didn't answer right away. She just set her glass down carefully and said, "They look at me like I've invaded sacred territory." Ethan pressed his lips together for a second, then said, "Maybe you represent something they can't name, someone who got here without asking permission, and that scares them." She turned to face him, surprised by his honesty. "Do you feel that way too?" He smiled slightly. "Every time I go to these kinds of events." Maya looked away, trying to absorb the information. Maybe, after all, he was also out of place in his own way, and that somehow made it all a little less unbearable. Maya had managed to maintain her composure until dinner was served. Sitting next to Ethan at one of the main tables, she listened more than she spoke, watching the men adjust the cuffs of their designer shirts and the women smile between sips of expensive wine. She was exhausted from pretending to be comfortable, but she did her best to appear invisible. That was when one of the guests, a blonde woman with a firm voice and a sharp gaze, turned around with a smile full of venom. "Ethan, my dear, your date has a peculiar charm. Where did you get her from? Some alternative casting?" The phrase was said naturally, as if it were a joke, but the impact was like a slap without a hand. Embarrassed, Maya tried to look away, but Ethan slowly put his fork down on his plate. turned calmly and replied in a firm voice audible to everyone at the table. "She wasn't picked from anywhere. Maya was chosen by me, and if charm were synonymous with arrogance, you would have won all the contests." The silence that followed was thick as concrete. The woman pretended to laugh awkwardly, but everyone's gaze turned to Ethan with a mixture of astonishment and restrained respect. Maya felt her blood run hotter in her veins. She hadn't expected to be defended. She was used to defending herself alone, or to swallowing it in silence. But there, in front of everyone, that man who could simply ignore the comment and carry on as if nothing had happened, decided to take a stand. Not as a knight in armor, but as someone who understood the weight of what had been said. She looked at him sideways, still in disbelief. "Why did you do that?" she whispered, when they were alone for a moment as they exchanged dishes. "Because no one has the right to treat you like that," he replied, without hesitation. "I'm not here to embarrass you, Maya. I'm here to get to know you." That sentence, so simple but said with such truth, broke something inside her. A type of armor she had been wearing for years, the armor of someone who needs to protect herself even from those who smile. The night went on, but something had changed. Maya began to allow herself to relax, albeit subtly. Ethan's gaze was neither invasive nor impatient. He asked small but relevant questions. "Have you always lived in New York? Who was the first person to believe in you? What would you like to do if you could start over?" And over time, she began to answer. She told him about her grandmother, about her dream of one day opening a small literary cafe in a quiet neighborhood, about how she liked to write sentences in used notebooks. "Life has taught me that those who write never break completely," she said, her eyes distant. Ethan listened without interrupting, just nodding, as if each sentence she said carried the weight of an important contract. In that room full of powerful people, Maya felt for the first time that her story was more interesting than her dress. When the orchestra began to play something soft and the couple stood up to dance, Ethan held out his hand. "Do you want to dance with me?" Maya hesitated. "I don't know how to dance like them." He smiled, that discreet, almost sad smile. "Neither do I, but we can invent our own rhythm." She took his hand without knowing why, and followed him to the center of the room. Their steps were clumsy, but their gazes, they were already dancing naturally. As they slowly twirled, she felt something forming between them, something that wasn't a contract or an obligation or a theater. It was just a silent exchange between two solitudes that recognized each other in the crowd. 2 days after that event, Maya could still feel the echo of his looks and words circling like invisible darts. But more than that, she remembered Ethan's unexpected defense and the way he made her feel valid. It was a strange feeling for someone who had always been treated as invisible. She was finishing making tea for her grandmother when her cell phone vibrated with a short message. "Dinner tonight? Nothing formal, just the two of us." She stared at the screen as if deciphering a riddle. Part of her wanted to deny it, to protect herself from anything that resembled attachment. But another part, more stubborn and lively, said that he deserved at least a chance to be who he seemed to be. He simply replied, "It's okay, but no heels, expensive dresses, and company speeches." He replied in seconds, "I promised jeans and pizza. I'll pick you up at 8. For the first time in a long time, Maya laughed alone in the kitchen. The restaurant was small, tucked away on a charming street in Greenwich Village, with exposed brick walls and French music playing from old speakers. Maya had arrived first, dressed in jeans, a simple white blouse, and her hair pulled back in an unassuming ponytail. When Ethan walked in, wearing a light blue shirt with rolled-up sleeves and understated sneakers, she almost didn't recognize him. Without the tie, without the expensive watch, without the stares surrounding him, he seemed younger, almost vulnerable. They sat at a table in the back, and the conversation began shyly, like a dance between words still learning to trust each other. "Do you come here often?" she asked. "Not really." I come when I want to remember who I was. Before all this, she watched him for a moment, trying to imagine this man dealing with failure. And who were you? Ethan took a sip of wine and smirked. A guy who thought success was noise. Now I know it's silence. The food arrived, and with it, the words began to fall like autumn leaves. Maya told us about her childhood, filled with constant moving and improvised recipes, about her father who left too soon, and her mother who fell ill prematurely. She also told us about how writing in notebooks was her way of existing when no one else seemed to notice she was there. Ethan listened with rare attention, leaning forward slightly, never interrupting. When it was his turn, he spoke about his mother, who pretended to be happy at high society parties, and his father, who only praised him when he closed deals. I grew up learning that love was a reward, not a presence. Maya nodded slowly. And you still believe that? He took a while to answer. I'm trying to relearn. It was in that pause, full of truth, that the two looked at each other for too long. And it was in that silence, more eloquent than any words, that their faces came closer. The kiss was calm, unhurried, a meeting of worlds that had always seemed too far apart, until that moment. Maya backed away slowly, as if she was afraid she had crossed an invisible line. But Ethan didn't force anything. He just looked into her eyes and said, "You look at me like I'm real, and I don't even know how to react to that." She smiled, touching her chin, as if she was processing everything at the same time. "That's because you are." The words came out before she could stop them, and he understood, not as a compliment, but as an acknowledgement. They were silent for a few seconds, listening in the background to an old song by Edith Piaf that spoke of lives starting over. There, between plain walls and yellow lights, they weren't a fake CEO and escort. They were just two survivors of the world trying to find each other amidst the chaos. And for a brief moment, the world outside ceased to exist. The morning after dinner, Maya woke up with the light feeling of someone who, for the first time in a long time, wasn't preparing to run away. Her phone was vibrating silently on her dresser, and for a moment she thought it was a text from Ethan. But what she found was something very different. A news notification from a gossip website with the headline in bold letters, "Billionaire CEO hires new high-end escort. Who is the mysterious woman who won over Ethan Cole?" Maya's body froze. When she clicked on it, she saw photos of herself, some from the event, others clearly taken on the street. The text said she was a former cleaning lady promoted to gala muse and insinuated that their contract involved more than corporate events. The article mixed sarcasm, misinformation, and a cruel touch of social mockery. Maya felt her legs go weak. Her name, her image, her dignity, it was all there, exposed and distorted. And the worst part, without your permission. She tried calling Ethan once, twice, 5 times, nothing. She sent short messages. "Did you see this?" And then, "We need to talk." No answer. The silence on the other end was more deafening than 1,000 headlines. That same afternoon, Maya was called to a meeting at the agency's headquarters. When she entered the room, she found closed faces and looks that no longer concealed their coldness. "Unfortunately, Mr. Cole has asked for the contract to be terminated for now. He thanks you for your understanding and hopes that everything can be resolved in the best possible way." The words came dry, bureaucratic, as if she were a defective item that had been returned. "He didn't even want to talk to me?" she asked, her voice trembling. "It's not convenient right now. The company's image is damaged." Maya didn't know what hurt more, the public scandal or the fact that Ethan had chosen to disappear right now. She left the room as if floating, feeling the weight of every glance that crossed hers in the hallway. When she reached the street, she cried in silence. The wind seemed to mock her, tearing papers from her bag as if it wanted to undo everything she had achieved. Ethan, meanwhile, was locked in a conference room with his partners and legal department. The pressure was unbearable. "The company has lost 6% in market value since yesterday," one of the directors was saying. "The shareholders are threatening to trigger personal liability clauses," another was saying. "You need to cut this tie now. This is about money, Ethan, and money has no time for romance." He listened in silence, his jaw tense, his eyes fixed on a random point at the table. Inside him, the anger was not directed at the press or at the partners. It was at himself for not having foreseen it, for having exposed Maya, for having left her so vulnerable. When he finally spoke, his voice came out like a dull blade. "Do what you have to do." And he left the room. In his office, he stared out the window at the city and remembered her smile when he told him about the literary cafe, the calm kiss, the way she looked at him without expecting anything in return, without demanding anything. He had abandoned her, not because of a lack of feelings, but because of fear. And now, for the first time in years, he felt ashamed of the man he was. Maya spent the next few days as if she were walking through a minefield. The neighbors whispered, the glances on the street lasted for too many seconds, and even the grocery store owner hesitated to accept the debit card she always used to buy her grandmother's medicine. "It's you, right? The one from the internet," he said with a quill disguised as curiosity. Maya kept her head held high, but inside, everything was falling apart. It wasn't just the end of a contract, it was the end of an illusion, of the belief that there could be something beyond the fight, beyond the shame. At night, she wrote, compulsively in her notebooks, trying to transform into poetry that which hurt too much to be remembered. "He made me believe, and now he throws me away like trash," she whispered to herself once, looking at the window as if she expected him to appear there, with the same courage he had shown when he defended her at dinner. But he didn't come, and in that silence, Maya understood that what hurt wasn't the exposure. It was the abandonment of someone who promised, without promising, that he would be by her side. Maya thought she had already endured the worst when she saw her image dragged through the mud of the internet and was silenced by those who claimed to admire her. But fate sometimes has a cruel taste of irony. On a grey Saturday morning, when she was trying to sell homemade cakes at a street fair to raise money for her grandmother's medicine, a familiar figure appeared among the stalls, tall, with a cynical smile, and the look of someone who always thought the world was a stage. Marcus, her ex-fiancé, whom she had left 2 years earlier after discovering betrayals, humiliations, and debts in his name. The same one who had disappeared when her grandmother got sick, and she needed him most. "Maya, long time no see, huh?" His voice came like sweet poison. She froze. "What do you want?" he asked bluntly. "I came to offer you an opportunity or a problem. It depends on how you prefer to deal with it." He took his cell phone out of his pocket and showed, with the naturalness of someone trading fruit, a gallery of old photos, intimate audios, screenshots of conversations. "Imagine this ending up on the same website that loved to make a scandal out of you. But it's simple. Give me what I ask for, and disappear." She stared at him as if she were being astonished. "You owe me, Maya. I kept quiet when you disappeared. Now you're famous, you have money, contracts. You won't even feel it." With each sentence he said, she felt her throat close up, her stomach churn. There wasn't enough anger to cover the disgust. "You want me back in the same hole you threw me in, right?" Marcus laughed. "No, honey, I just want what I deserve. Money or a little space in the media. Choose." She held on tightly to the counter of the stall, trying not to tremble. The man in front of her was a cruel reminder of everything she had fought to bury. Submission, shame, fear. "I will not bow down to you again. Never again," he said, through clenched teeth. He took a step closer, threatening. "Think about it. You're already on the ground. All that's left is to dig." Maya didn't answer. She took out her cell phone and took a picture of him. "Now you're the one who's registered. And if anyone else sees anything of mine, You're the one who's going to fall." He walked away, still smiling, but his eyes betrayed his discomfort. She stood there, breathing deeply, trying to understand how someone could carry so much poison and still walk in a straight line. That night, for the first time, Maya wrote everything down in a long, intimate, painful, but real text. She described her past with Marcus, the interview mistake, the contract, the exposure, the kiss with Ethan, and finally, the blackmail. She wrote it for herself, but she knew that the text had another destination. The next morning, she called a journalist she had met at an event, a woman with a sincere look and a firm posture. "I have something to tell you, but I want it to be heard in the right way." She arranged an interview at a discreet cafe in Brooklyn, brought her notebooks, old photos, copies of the contract, and the courage she seemed to have lacked for weeks. She spoke for hours, with contained tears, a firm voice, and the certainty that if she lost everything, at least she would not lose herself. "I walked through the wrong door, but maybe it was the only right one in my life." At the end of the conversation, the journalist held her hand for a second longer. "Some people become news. You became history." Maya returned home with a heavy heart, but with a clear sense that she had made the right decision. It was time for the world to know who she was, from her. The next day, the video of the interview spread across the networks like a breath of dignity amidst so much noise. Thousands of comments filled the page. Brave, authentic. This woman is real. People who had never met her were now moved by her story. More than empathy, there was identification. Maya was not a victim. She was a mirror for many. Ethan watched the interview alone, in the darkness of his room without blinking. Each word she said was an arrow that hit his chest. The pain on his face was silent but deep. When she said, looking at the camera, "I don't ask you to understand me, just don't erase me," he lowered his head. For the first time since the scandal, he felt he needed to step out of the role of CEO, protector, manager, and assume the role of a man who made mistakes, who was afraid, but who could not and did not want to let that woman carry the weight of everything alone. That same night, he picked up his cell phone and called his lawyer. "I want a meeting with the partners tomorrow and prepare a new contract, a completely different one." The impact of the interview was stronger and more immediate than Maya had imagined. In just a few days, she received hundreds of messages from women who recognized themselves in her story, from journalists asking for new testimonies, from social projects offering partnerships. But more than that, she felt something she hadn't experienced in a long time: respect. For the first time, people didn't define her by a mistake, a background, or a scandal. They defined her by her courage, by her voice, by her choice to stand up when everything seemed to be pushing her to the ground. Walking the streets of New York was no longer an exercise in escape. It was, little by little, a return to the world. But now, as someone who occupied her own space, her grandmother, overcome with emotion, hugged her tightly every night. "You spoke for so many who never could," she said once, wiping her eyes with a frayed handkerchief. Maya didn't know what would come next, but she knew that whatever it was, she would come with her head held high. Ethan, on the other hand, was living a silent storm. After the interview, his image on social media had changed, from a cold villain to a silent coward. But that wasn't what hurt him the most. What tore him apart was seeing Maya face the world alone, while he, who had said he respected her, hid behind contracts and protocols. At the meeting with the partners, Ethan surprised everyone by arriving without a suit, briefcase, or rehearsed speech. "I want to say a few things before you start presenting me with numbers," he said, standing in front of a table full of executives and shareholders. "The woman you tried to silence with clauses and terminations is bigger than all this here. She's not a stain. She's a reflection of everything this world tries to hide. The truth." Their gazes met uneasily. Some coughed, others looked away. But Ethan continued, "I'm not asking for permission, I'm telling you. I'm temporarily stepping down as CEO, and I'm going to seek you out, not as a CEO, but as a man. And if we lose contracts because of this, we lose. I've already lost something more valuable, the chance to be whole in front of someone who saw me without a mask. That afternoon, Ethan walked through the city like an ordinary man, without drivers, without assistants, without appointments. He passed through squares, markets, and the same streets where he knew she walked. He stopped in front of the modest building where Maya lived and hesitated before ringing the doorbell. When he finally did, it was his grandmother who answered the door, her eyes sweet and curious. "Ethan Cole?" she said, surprised, recognizing him from the television. He smiled shyly. "It's me. I came to talk to Maya, if she wants to hear me." The lady watched him for a moment, as if reading an old letter. "She's on the building's communal terrace. You can come up." Ethan thanked her with a respectful nod and climbed the narrow stairs until he found Maya sitting on a bench made of reclaimed wood, surrounded by makeshift potted plants and the setting sun gilding her face. She saw him, but said nothing. She just lowered her gaze, as if her heart wanted to protect itself from another fall. He approached slowly, without ready words. He sat down beside her and sighed. "I saw your interview, and I saw myself in your silence, in what you didn't say, but felt." Maya remained silent for a few seconds. Then she spoke in a low but firm voice. "You left me alone when I needed you most. When everything exploded, I thought, he'll call me, he'll explain it to me. But you disappeared, like everyone always does." Ethan nodded slowly, his eyes filled with tears. "You're right. I was a coward. I thought protecting you meant disappearing, but I realized too late that protecting someone isn't hiding them. It's being by their side, even when it hurts." She turned her face to him, her eyes shining with contained anger. "I didn't need you to solve everything. I just wanted you not to be another one, to run away." Ethan held his knee tightly, trying to contain his emotion. "I didn't come to justify myself. I came to tell you that I'm here, not as a man who wants you to accept him, but as someone who knows that if he doesn't walk by your side, he'll continue to feel half." Maya looked at him for a long time. She took a deep breath. "What if I don't want to forgive you?" He smiled, pained. "Then at least let me be the part of me you believed existed." The morning after their reunion on the terrace, Ethan called a press conference on his own behalf, something he hadn't done in years without prior authorization from the board. The room filled with journalists, cameras, and curious onlookers. He entered without his usual stone expression, wearing a light shirt and a simple blazer without shield or armor. When he stepped up to the podium, there were no papers in his hands, only the truth in his eyes. "For a long time, image was my greatest asset. I built an empire based on speeches, contracts, and figures. But in the process, I lost the only thing that could save me: authenticity." The buzz began, but he continued, firm. "Maya Rodriguez was not a communication error. She was my greatest success. She walked through the wrong door, they say. I spent years walking through the right doors for the wrong reasons. And today, by choice, I am stepping down as CEO of Cole Enterprises for an indefinite period. I will dedicate myself to something that challenges me more than any business meeting: rebuilding my humanity." While the press fired questions and flashbulbs, Ethan calmly handed over a dossier to reporters, explaining his new initiative, an institute dedicated to training young people from underprivileged communities in technology and communication, a project that grew out of a conversation he had with Maya about her dream of a literary cafe. "She taught me that writing is about survival, and I want to transform that into an opportunity for thousands." The last question, from a young journalist, was the one that disarmed him. "And Maya, where does she fit into all this?" Ethan took a deep breath. "She doesn't fit in. She leads. I invited Maya Rodriguez to be a partner and curator of the project, but above all, I invited her as someone who invites a possible future. The answer, as it has always been, is hers. The press conference ended with a mix of surprise and emotion. In a world accustomed to staging, the truth had more impact than any script. That afternoon, Maya received an envelope delivered by a messenger. Inside was a handwritten letter, not an email or an official document. The first lines trembled as if they had been written by someone who could no longer hide their fears. I'm not offering you a job, Maya. I'm offering you a space to create, transform, make mistakes, and start over. I no longer want to walk in front of you or pull you onto the stage. I want to walk by your side. And if one day this project grows, may it grow with the words you've always tried to keep in your heart. If you don't want to accept, I'll understand. But if you do, let's open this door together. Maya read and reread those lines, with her heart racing. It wasn't an apology, it was a new proposal for the world, and this time she was invited to build, not to represent. Accepting wasn't an immediate decision. Maya spent days debating with herself, with her grandmother, with the pages of her notebooks. But something inside her was beginning to vibrate with the possibility of being truly heard. When she finally responded, it was with a silent visit to the Institute's makeshift headquarters, where Ethan was already organizing. Everything in a small room with empty shelves and boxes of paper scattered around. She entered without warning, carrying a box in her hands. "Books for the first shelf," she said, carefully placing the weight on the table. Ethan looked up, surprised, and stood up slowly. "So, is that a yes?" Maya crossed her arms, serious. "This is a start, and if it's going to be, it will be with new rules. No disguises, no contract that defines who I am." He smiled, his eyes brimming with tears. "No disguises, I promise." And there, amidst boxes, weak coffee, and dreams under construction, the two sealed something much stronger than any document, a new way of walking together. The days that followed Maya's entry into the project were not fairy tales. There was no magic, no shortcuts, no cinematic soundtracks, but there was something she had never had before: consistency. Ethan did not disappear after difficult days, nor did he try to control her decisions. He listened, suggested, and backed down when she raised her voice to defend an idea. The project was named Open Doors, a suggestion from Maya, who insisted that the name should convey the irony of the fate that had brought them together. "It was a wrong door that brought me here, so let it become a symbol of other right doors." Ethan laughed at the time, as he only did when he was truly at peace. And so they began to work side by side, sharing not only responsibilities, but hurried coffees, afternoons of reading, and conversations that went beyond the workday. She talked about poetry, he talked about source code, and, without realizing it, they created their own language, made of pauses, glances, and small daily concessions. One Friday afternoon, as they were organizing the first students for the project and reviewing materials, a blackout took over the building. The power suddenly went out, leaving them in the dark, surrounded by stacks of books and boxes of files. "I think we'll have to postpone the inaugural class," Ethan said humorously, turning on the flashlight on his phone to illuminate the room. Maya sat on the floor, laughing. "Or we could use it to practice how to improvise." He sat next to her, his legs crossed, his face half illuminated by the screen. For a few minutes, they sat in silence, listening to the distant sounds of the city and the ticking of an old clock. "You know what I admire most about you?" he said after a while. "You don't try to fit in. You expand the space." Maya looked at him tenderly, her head leaning against the wall. "And you stop trying to mold me. That's worth more than flowers." He held out his hand unhurriedly. She took it, and there in the dark, it was as if all the lights turned on inside. This time, the kiss didn't come as a rupture, nor as a reward. It came as a continuation of something that already existed, as if their bodies were simply sealing what their souls had already agreed upon. There was no more urgency, no fear, no doubt. Maya knew who she was. Ethan knew what he wanted, and between them there was now a clean space without impositions, where each gesture had the exact weight of truth. When the light came back on, they were both laughing, still sitting on the floor, like teenagers surprised by the simplicity of a moment that didn't fit on social media. "We're late for the world," she said. "Let the world wait," he replied, kissing her forehead. And in that sentence, there was more commitment than in any alliance. Over time, the two began to frequent not only the same spaces, but also the same silences. Ethan learned how to prepare the chamomile tea that Maya's grandmother drank before bed. Maya learned the basics of programming just to understand the young people who were being trained at the institute. Little by little, they built not only a relationship, but a daily routine made up of small but meaningful gestures. There was no official proposal. There was presence. There was surrender. And on a random Sunday at a used book fair in Brooklyn, Maya stopped in front of an old copy of The House of the Spirits and said, almost without realizing it, "That was my mother's favorite book." Ethan bought it on the spot and wrote on the first page, "To Maya, who writes her story with courage, with love, E." She didn't answer. She just hugged him. And in that gesture, there was everything they needed to say. The auditorium at the City Civic Center was packed on that spring afternoon. The E building's facade was decorated with colorful posters, inspirational quotes, and photographs of young Open Doors students. Cameras positioned in every corner broadcast the event live to public schools, libraries, and community centers. On the stage, a single empty chair in the center, surrounded by stacked books and connected tablets, symbolized the merging of worlds that had previously seemed incompatible. Maya, backstage, arranged the papers she had not intended to read. She knew what to say. She knew because it came from the most intimate place she had, her own story. Ethan appeared at her side, adjusting the buttons of his untucked shirt, as she had asked. "Are you ready?" he asked. "No, but that's never stopped me before," he replied with a tight smile. He took her hand, squeezed it firmly. "It's going to be beautiful." She nodded, and together they walked toward the stage. The lights went out in the room. A 2-minute video was projected on the screen, telling the story of the project the workshops held, the smiling faces of the students, and a snippet of the interview that changed everything. Maya telling the camera, "I walked through the wrong door, but maybe it was the only right one." When the lights came back on, she was already center stage. For a moment, the silence seemed absolute. Then she took a deep breath and began, "For a long time, I thought I didn't belong anywhere, that my place was behind, to the side, or invisible, until someone looked at me as if I were real, and that made me want to be more." Her words gained substance, strength, and echo. "This project is not about me, nor about him. It's about everyone who has ever been mistaken for a mistake, when in fact, they were a chance." Discreet tears ran down the face of a woman in the front row. Maya looked at Ethan, who was watching with shining eyes, and continued, "Today we open doors, and behind each one there is a story. Yours can start now." The audience gave a standing ovation, and more than that, many were crying. Maya stepped off the stage with shaky legs and a burning chest. Ethan was waiting for her at the foot of the stairs, his eyes fixed on her as if it were the first time. "You changed everything," he said, hugging her tightly. She smiled, not alone. The event continued with speeches by the young people, artistic presentations and tours of the new facilities. But between each speech, each photo, each flash, it was clear that there was a new story being written there, one that did not fit into headlines. At the end of the event, Ethan held Maya's hand naturally in front of the press. There was no longer any need to hide. There was no longer any fear of scandal. What existed now was something rarer, authenticity, and that, in their world, was worth more than any rising stock on the stock market. Later, back in the small office where it had all started, Ethan opened a bottle of simple wine and 2 glasses. "It's not champagne, but I think it suits us better." Maya laughed, sitting barefoot on the windowsill with her feet propped up. After all, simple has become luxury. They toasted without exaggeration, as if sealing something that doesn't need to be shouted. Night was falling over New York, and the city lights twinkled outside. "Remember when you said you wanted to open a literary cafe?" he asked. She nodded. "Is the name still the same?" Maya thought for a second. "It's changed? Now it would be Open Doors Cafe." He smiled. "Then we'll open another one." She slowly approached him, sat on his lap and hugged him tightly. "Thank you for not leaving me alone this time." And he replied, his forehead resting against hers. "This time, I walked through the right door." Months had passed since the project's official inauguration, and the Open Doors headquarters was already buzzing with life. Young people with colorful backpacks crossed the hallways carrying ideas, projects, books, and dreams. Maya walked among them with a genuine smile on her face, often without them noticing who she was. She liked this, being a presence, not a symbol. She had created a reading room on the 2nd floor with bookshelves made of recycled wood, colorful rugs, and pillows scattered on the floor. Sometimes she would sit with the quieter students, the ones who reminded her of her younger self, and say, "You don't have to speak loudly to be heard. You just have to speak truthfully." And they listened. They listened because they saw in her more than a coordinator. They saw someone who knew the way inside out, someone who had opened doors with her own hands. Ethan, now far from the big corporate halls, had found a new rhythm. He spent his mornings at the Institute and his afternoons developing accessibility applications for young people. His presence was no longer marked by the sound of hurried heels on marble or endless meetings, but by the calm with which he explained concepts of logic and programming with rare patience. Transformation was visible. There was less tension in his shoulders, less haste in his gaze. When he wasn't busy, he would seek out Maya with some pretext, a coffee, an idea, a new book, and, in silence, sit by her side just to share her company. They didn't talk about love every day, but they lived as if they said it in every detail, and for both of them, that was enough. One summer Sunday, they held a small open-air market in the Foundation's courtyard. Students sold cakes, T-shirts with phrases. They had created zines and poems printed on colorful sheets of paper. Maya's grandmother, now in stable health, sat in a wheelchair under the shade of a cherry tree planted there by one of the boys in the project. Ethan pushed the chair gently, while Maya enthusiastically introduced the booths. At one point, a shy 12-year-old girl approached Maya with a notebook in her hands. "I wrote this after I saw your interview," she said, almost in a whisper. Maya gently took the notebook and read, the poem with tears in her eyes. When she finished, she knelt in front of the girl and hugged her. "You have a beautiful voice. Keep writing, keep walking through every door, even if they say it's wrong." The girl nodded, moved. And in that moment, Maya knew that everything, the fear, the shame, the pain, had been worth it. At the end of that day, when everyone was leaving and the sky was turning the walls of the Institute golden, Ethan and Maya sat on the steps at the entrance, watching the sunset. "Do you think all this will last?" he asked, his head resting on her shoulder. Maya thought for a moment and answered with a soft smile, "As long as there are stories to tell, as long as there is someone willing to walk through a door without knowing what is on the other side, yes, it will last." He kissed her calmly, with the certainty of someone who no longer needed to prove anything to anyone. There, between simple walls, whole hearts and joined hands, there was a new beginning. And this time, it was a chosen beginning. No contract, no script, only love. If you like this story, subscribe to the channel, leave a like and activate notifications so you don't miss future content. Hasta luego.